I'm going to share with you the 12 most essential travel tips for coming to the fastest growing country in all of Latin America. I'm talking about my home, right here, the Dominican Republic. So let's dive in. The first tip is, when should you travel down here? The most ideal time to visit, truthfully, is somewhere between mid-January and May. Honestly, any time of the year is fine, but I'll give you a couple of reasons why maybe that's the perfect window. First, if you're looking at the priciest time of year, it's going to be anything around Christmas and New Year. So mid-December to early January, you'll see airline prices, resort prices, Airbnb prices go up significantly. So if price is a concern, avoid those couple of weeks. A lot of people are concerned about hurricane season, which exists from like July through the end of November. Now, in my time living here, almost 3 years as I record this, we've had one Hurricane Fiona, and we got married here in 2010, right in the middle of hurricane season in September. So it's not as if you can't visit during those months, but I know some people are concerned about it. I think they don't need to be as much, but just so you know, that's the season. In addition, that kind of corresponds with a portion of the rainy season. It gets a little rainy in the fall. It can get a little rainy in spring as well, but fall into winter, so like November, December, you could see some rain as well. So just a heads up. And then honestly, from May through October, it is just hot, like crazy hot. So if you're looking for that time frame where the prices aren't too bad, the weather is sort of ideal, and you don't need to worry about a hurricane if that's a fear of yours, mid-January through May, perfect. And before we go on, I'd love for you to subscribe, like, drop a comment. It helps me grow the channel and put out more content for you like this. But I just want to be your guide to life and visiting here in the Dominican Republic. The second tip comes up with, where do you travel? I'm going to give you 5 different locations, and we'll deep dive these a little bit more as we go into the video later. So let me give you an overview. The first spot is Punta Cana. It is the most popular by far. Out of the 11 million people that visited here last year, about 65% come to Punta Cana. It's the biggest airport, most modern, has all the infrastructure that most Americans, Canadians are used to in their own countries. And of course, it's the resorts and everything else. That's where I live. I live in Punta Cana. That's where this is right now. This is not a resort. This is my home. I live in a house in a little community within a gated community. So it looks like a little bit of a resort, but this is just my day-to-day. Humble brag. There's a place that's sort of secondary to Punta Cana that was the #1 spot. Now it's kind of become #2, and they're really doing a lot of work up there, and it's Puerto Plata. This is up on the north side of the island. Same thing, they have resorts and plenty of amenities for tourists and people coming in to visit. A little quieter, a little slower than Punta Cana. There's a lot going on up there we'll talk about in a little bit. The third spot is right into the capital city of Santo Domingo. If you're looking for more of an urban adventure, there's plenty to do in that city. It's home to about 4 or 5 million people, and they have a great, food scene, the history, everything. It's incredible, so you'll want to check that out. The 4th and 5th place are lesser known, but are becoming more popular. And number 4, I would say, is Las Terrenas. This is up in the Samana Peninsula. It's a bustling, thriving little town with the best beaches in the country. I think there are 27 total beaches up in Samana Peninsula, and some of them in the Las Terrenas area are just like idyllic Caribbean. You got to go check them out. And the last place is definitely not what you would think of when you come to the Dominican Republic, and that's a town called Jarabacoa. Jarabacoa is right in the middle of the country. It's in the mountains. It's a much more temperate climate. So like in the wintertime when you go there, it gets down into the 50s, 60s at night, which may not sound cold if you're from the north, but when you live here and it's 90s all the time, it's a place where you actually have to put a hoodie on at night. But they've got a great scene downtown. You can stay up in an Airbnb in the mountains. It's just a beautiful place and worth a visit for sure. Again, we'll touch on all of these in later tips. The third tip is, how do you pay? How do you spend money in country? For a lot of people, when they're coming here, it's like, do I bring cash? Do I convert that cash? Do I use credit cards? What do I do? And honestly, the first and easiest way to do everything here is just a credit card with no international fees. I use the Marriott Bonvoy card, and I'll also use some American Express cards to get points or whatever. But the Marriott Bonvoy card for me, because of travel, for me, gives me a lot of points with Marriott, and it has no international fees. And I use that everywhere I go. Almost everyone, especially if you're in Punta Cana, Puerto Plata, almost everyone takes credit cards, from like roadside stands all the way up, of course, to the resorts and the Airbnbs and everything else. Credit cards are really, really easy to use in country. What I would say though is make sure you select Dominican pesos when charging, because you'll get a better conversion rate from your bank than you will from the local vendors. So if you got the choice between US dollars and pesos on the credit card transaction, select pesos. Thank me later. Second thing is just bring your own currency. I'm speaking probably to the United States mostly here. So if you're coming from the US or you have US dollars, bring that and spend it here. Just bring it in small denominations. Because again, if you go to restaurants or you go on an excursion, you're probably gonna charge it on a card, but you want the small dollars, $5 or whatever, just to tip people. Whether it's the guy driving you from the airport or the bag man at the resort or Airbnb or the housekeeper or the person giving you a tour, just bring few $100s in singles or fives so that you can just dole it out as you go. The other thing to understand is down here, when you do go to a restaurant or somewhere, you're gonna see maybe a couple of things on your receipt. The first is called the ITBIS, ITBIS. This is essentially sales tax. Let's just call it that for the purposes of this video. And it's 18%. So if you go to a restaurant, you're gonna see a line item for 18%, call that your sales tax. In addition, you're gonna see an additional 10%, often with the letters LEY next to it. That 10% is a service charge. It's intended to be given to the waiters, waitresses, and other staff as a tip. Whether or not it actually gets paid to them is always a source of debate down here. Do the owners of the restaurants hold it, or do they actually pay them? When we visit on vacation, we tip 20%. Living here, we just tip 10%. So in other words, they're already supposed to be getting 10%. I'm not responsible for whether that restaurant owner does or doesn't pay this waiter or waitress the 10% that is already charged on my card, but we drop another 10%. So essentially, we look at the 10% LEY, the ley, and we drop that same amount on the table in pesos or dollars. And at the time of this recording, the conversion is about 60 pesos for $1 US. So 300 pesos is about $5. But I don't think you need to convert currency. Honestly, you can if you want to. You can go to a bank locally or one of those little things at the airport, those kiosks, but US dollars are widely accepted. If you're just visiting for a week or so, just have US dollars on you and use your credit card for everything else. The next tip is really how to communicate with others when in country. And I don't even mean the language, because you're gonna see there's plenty of English spoken here, especially for those areas servicing tourists. But I would suggest you do two things before coming technologically. The first is download WhatsApp. If you're gonna do anything on or off the resort, if you're gonna message a tour guide or you're going to make a reservation at a restaurant, everything runs on WhatsApp. You're not gonna text, you're not gonna use iMessage. No one uses it. WhatsApp rules all. Most people have it, some don't. If you don't have WhatsApp, download it and use it, because that's the only way you're gonna communicate with people locally. The other thing I would tell you is contact your cell phone provider and ask them if your plan allows for international calls. There's a few different things here. Over the years, it's changed a bit. It used to be that a Verizon or an AT&T or a T-Mobile would charge you either $10 a day or like $100 a month per line for international calling while away, and they would cap that. There would be like a certain number of calls, certain amount of data that you could use when traveling internationally. Now, a lot of plans actually include international calls, but they may limit you to like one preferred nation. So I would just call your cell phone provider and say, hey, I'm traveling to the Dominican Republic. I'm gonna be there. I wanna be able to make a phone call or send a text on their cell network, which is very good, by the way, all around the country. Does my plan allow for that, or what do I need to do? And if it costs you a few extra dollars, I would absolutely suggest you do it. Just imagine landing at the airport. If you're maybe looking for your bus or ride service or whatever, if your cell phone isn't connecting because it's not quite grabbing a tower, you want the ability to do that, to connect, to make a phone call back up to the US if God forbid something happens, you lost something or whatever. I say get the international call plan for the $10 a day, or maybe your plan already comes preloaded with it. Check with them. I think T-Mobile already does, AT&T does, my Verizon plan does now, but it didn't always, so check with your carrier. All right, this next tip I think is probably the most important and the one that most people do not do, and I want to implore all of you to make sure you do this before you travel. And this is to the Dominican Republic. This is really to any country that's not your own, but I'll specify for here. Buy travel health insurance. The chances of you coming down, having an amazing trip and going home, that happens by the millions. On occasion, you hear of these stories, however, of something happening, whether it's getting sick or getting injured, even if it's just diving off of the wrong thing or whatever, and then having to experience what it's like to get medical treatment in another country without insurance. Recently, there was a very sad story of a young man from Canada who was attacked at a resort by another Canadian that he didn't know. It wasn't anything to do with this country. I want to make that very clear. But he was attacked by another tourist and he had a massive injury in his head. He was sent to a local hospital. He had to have surgery. And as of the time of this recording, I think he's starting to recover, but the family is being absolutely crushed with medical bills. In fact, they have a GoFundMe that I'll drop down below. If you wanted to donate to it, feel free to. But here's what happens. When he goes to the hospital in this country, it's a private hospital. The priority is, how are we going to get paid? For the triage folks, for the people at the front desk, they're looking at how am I going to get paid? How is the hospital going to get paid? Do they have insurance? What kind of insurances do we have? If they don't have insurance, that will get paid. Believe it or not, the mother of this young man even confirmed it in the article. It took them a little time, even though he needed surgery, for the front desk to confirm payment before they brought him back for surgery. Once you're in surgery, great doctors. The people in the back, the doctors, the nurse, the hospital staff, amazing. We've had our son hospitalized here and they were great. But what made it easy for us is we had local insurance. You may have a credit card insurance, you may have a plan plan like Aetna that you see is accepted at certain hospitals down here, because they are. There's a group down here called IMG Group. They accept Aetna. Maybe some places accept Blue Cross. I don't know. But if you, God forbid, are in the situation where you're incapacitated and you need to get in right away, you want the people at the front desk who aren't making a ton of money and who are just simply following a very specific process to not have to think about whether or not your coverage is accepted in that hospital. The coverage I use locally is called Humano. I buy an annual plan because I live here full time with my family, but they also have a product called Buen Viaje. I'll drop the link down below. I have zero affiliation with them other than being a customer. I don't get paid anything for you to research or buy with them. But if you walk into a hospital with a Humano card, you'll be taken care of. We've had that happen. My oldest had dengue fever, which is a mosquito-borne illness, and he had to be hospitalized for a couple of days to have an IV to let it cycle through. And when we got to the hospital, they didn't know that we were local or had local insurance, so they were gonna send us through a whole process to verify income. When they saw the local insurance card, boom, we were admitted and in a room within minutes. I think from what I've researched, the plan that I just mentioned from Humano for travel insurance is about 2,000 pesos. It's about $30. I might be wrong on that. Do your own research. Again, no affiliation with them. And you could buy other travel insurances for sure, but just buy travel insurance that you know is widely accepted down here in the Dominican Republic. The two biggest insurance companies are Humano and Universal. If you find a travel plan with either of them, you're gonna be great anywhere you go in country. Again, remember, 11 million people visit and millions and millions and millions of them go home. 99.5% of them go home, no issue, but it happens. And I'd rather you spend the $30, $40, $50 to be protected and make sure that you get right into care, which is very good care, than have any issue down here otherwise. My next tip is drive around. You're gonna hear a lot of people talk about driving in the Dominican Republic, and look, it can be nutty. The little motorcycles that drive around and just the way some of the trucks and buses drive, it's crazy. A couple of easy tips on this are stay away from the buses and big trucks. If they're barreling down the road, just let them go. Let them get by you and just keep an eye out for the motos. Also, I would avoid driving at night like I do, I'll be honest, but it's not ideal because some of these bikes don't have lights on sometimes and all of that. But beyond that, there's a very modern highway system down here. You'll be actually blown away by some of the rest stops and what's available to you on the highway going all around the country. And there's really three ways to get around. You can choose. First is Uber. Uber is widely accepted. It's everywhere down here. You can get into an Uber. I use it all the time. It's not too pricey at all, and it's widely accessible pretty much anywhere in the island. Something you'll notice with Uber here is when you get a driver, you actually have to provide them with a 4-digit PIN that Uber will give you before the ride can start. So it's an additional measure of safety to confirm that this is the right vehicle for you to be in. But beyond that, I would give you the same advice I would give anyone taking an Uber anywhere. Look at the plate when they arrive. Look at the amount of rides this person has done. Look at their ratings from reviews. And if you're not comfortable with them, cancel it. The other thing you can do in Uber, if you don't know this, is you can actually text your ride to anybody that you designate in your Uber app. I have it set up so that my mother and my sister-in-law, who both live in the United States, can get a text if I so choose whenever I start a ride. So if I get into a ride and everything seems good, but just something feels a little bit off for me, I send the text. They see that the ride initiated, and when the ride ends, they'll get a text that it ended. So if it doesn't end, at least they're like, whatever happened to Jamie? But honestly, the only time I've ever used it was in Philadelphia. I've never used it down here. I had to use it there because, this ride a little later in the day was a little scary. So Uber's a great way to get around. Just follow the same protocols you would in the States. The other thing with Uber here is you may get a driver that asks you for cash instead of paying the Uber charge so that they get all of it. If you have the cash, pay them in cash if you want to. But I always just say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have cash. Some people say that Uber drivers will kick them out when that happens. I've never had that happen. And again, I live here. I don't visit and do it every so often. I use Uber all the time. So it just hasn't been my experience. But again, if they ask for cash, you're not comfortable, you can say, no thanks, I'm out, I'll find another Uber. Another way to get around the country is if you hire a driver. Now, this used to be a way cheaper thing than it is today. It's still not crazy expensive, but if you look online at different driving service, limo services, that kind of thing, where they have cars, you don't have to get a limo, but just like a regular car, you could probably hire a driver to take you around to different places for hundreds of dollars, maybe up to $1,000 depending on where you're going and how long you're staying. So if you're looking for a driver to take you 7 days all around the country, that'll cost you a little bit more than if you're just looking for like maybe a day trip back and forth somewhere. And then the third way, and I would recommend this one over any of the other two, is rent a car. Rent a car from the airport and drive around this amazing country. Again, the highway system is well developed. Santo Domingo, Santiago, big cities, they have traffic. It is what it is. GPS here works crazy well. Like, takes you through places you didn't realize were roads and somehow gets you to where you want to be accurately. I would recommend Waze over everything else, but you'll be pretty amazed at driving down here. I think having an SUV is good because you do get into smaller towns, there's some big speed bumps. Just getting over them is good to have with a something a little higher off the ground. And honestly, I use National Car Rental, which is the one that you all have in the United States. So again, get out, get around the country, Uber, get a driver, or just rent a car and go check it out. All right, my next tip is when you travel specifically to Punta Cana. And I'll just give you some high-level tips here because this is where I live and I know it the best out of any other place I'm gonna talk about as we go through the video. If you're looking for a resort recommendation, the best I've seen from a standpoint of service, food, access to the beach, all of that, is the Hyatt Ziva and Zilara in Cap Cana. Again, I get nothing from them. It's just the place that we found as the best spot in the whole area for everything. In fact, for Christmas, I gave my wife a solo weekend retreat at the Hyatt Zilara because I believe in it. It's a great spot. There are plenty of other great resorts. And if you're looking for more budget options that are still good, I'd look at the Palladium or Barceló. They're big resort complexes. Food is okay, but they have a ton to do on a resort. And again, there's a lot more. If you're going to Airbnb, there's so many different options. On the high end, you could stay in Cap Cana or Punta Cana resorts. Punta Cana resort's not a resort. It's actually an entire community development with multiple neighborhoods, beach bars, restaurants, all of that stuff. So you can rent a house, Airbnb a house or an apartment inside of that, or in Cap Cana, which is similar. They're about 10 minutes apart from one another, but they're both huge, like Manhattan-sized communities. If you want to be more beachfront, but like local and fun, there's Corrales and Cortecito up to the northern part of the Punta Cana area. Lots of restaurants, very walkable, really cool. More bustling and loud, so probably more for a younger crowd or just not with kids. You'll hear music at night, that sort of thing. If you're looking for more of a local stay, someplace like here, Punta Cana Village, there are some Airbnbs available. You can look at that. It's near the airport. Or there's places in the downtown Punta Cana area like Vista Cana or downtown Punta Cana or Bávaro, where you can get a condo, rent a car, and just sort of like be in the community of Punta Cana and drive over to beaches. Now, there are a few free beaches, if you will, that you can go to. One's called Bibijagua, another's called Cabeza de Toro, and a third to the north further is called Macau. They're all awesome, they're all beautiful, and they're easy to access. Now, the two best beaches, I think, in the area will actually require you to pay to go to them. So people will tell you that all Dominican beaches are public, and that is accurate legally. That law says essentially that for a certain amount of footage from the beachfront in, you cannot restrict somebody's access. That said, if somebody owns all the land behind it, they can easily put up a toll gate or whatever for you to get through to it. So while it's technically public, they're realistically private. And those two beaches are Playa Blanca and Playa Juanillo. Playa Blanca is inside of Punta Cana Resort. So if you're staying in Punta Cana Village or Punta Cana Resorts, you'll have access to it for free. Juanillo is in Cap Cana. So again, if you're staying in Cap Cana, you'll have access for free. If you want to go see those beaches, at the gate, you'll pay a fee. It's usually $50 or so per adult to enter. And that money, that $50, becomes credit at the restaurant at the beach. So you're essentially prepaying a portion or all of your bill at the restaurant at the beach you're going to by paying at the gate. To me, totally worth it. All right, that's Punta Cana. I want to go to the next place. The next tip is going to be Puerto Plata. Puerto Plata is on the North Shore, as I noted earlier. It's a city, but also an entire province. So when some people talk about Puerto Plata, they're talking about just the kind of town of Puerto Plata, and others are talking about the entire province, because the province has a lot of cool stuff in it. If you're staying in Puerto Plata city, there's a ton to do there. You can go to the kind of their little colonial zone downtown. There's this street down there that's all pink. I can't remember the name of it, but you can go check that out. It's really cool to walk around and check things out. In addition, you can take the teleférico up to this mountain where they have the kind of Brazil Jesus statue up there and a whole area you can walk and explore. The teleférico is not for the faint of heart, in my opinion. It's a little cart that takes you way up on a mountain. I had to close my eyes at a certain point because it kind of felt like it went vertical. It was crazy, but worth it. But in the province itself, I would get out and check out Cabarete. I would check out Sosúa, even go further. I don't know if it's quite in the province anymore, but places like Rio San Juan are further east that you can get to just by driving kind of along the North Shore through all these little beach towns. Cabarete, to me, is the crown jewel of that area. It's great surf beaches, it's a cool little beach town, tons of restaurants, some of the best waffles I've ever had I've gotten in Cabarete at a place called Vagamundo. Crazy, but is what it is. Some great arepas up there too if you like Venezuelan food, at a place called Arepa World in this little food park. And there's a whole bunch of other little spots there. Mesa Taino, there's a whole bunch of places that you can check out in Cabarete. Sosúa has a reputation for, let's say, the working girls. And it's true, they're there, but Sosúa also has a great downtown, plenty of stuff to do. I always felt like just not going into town at night, into Sosúa at night, I'm good. But Sosúa also has grocery stores and some other stuff that's really good. Great amenities there. We've stayed everywhere from in Cabarete to a little community called Sosúa Ocean Village, which is a gated community, very modern. It's on the water. There's a ton of houses and stuff like that in there. I think it's a good central spot. It's about 10 minutes from Cabarete, 10 minutes from Sosúa downtown. And if it's a kind of your first time, it will be the least culture shock because it's very well developed and all of that. In addition, Puerto Plata is getting an area developed called Punta Bergantin, which is entire development, including a full-on movie studio owned by Vin Diesel. That's right, Vin Diesel. Big fan of DR. Actually, up on that North Shore, when you get further out to like Cabrera, like Mark Wahlberg owns there. There's a lot of celebrity ownership in towns up there because you'll see it's just completely beautiful. The next tip is going to be around Santo Domingo, the big city in the Dominican Republic. It's a big, bustling, busy place. And when you hear about like crime and whatever, Santo Domingo is where it's going to be. But it's in very specific neighborhoods. It is very easily avoidable. Where I would suggest somebody coming to stay is the neighborhood of Piantini. Piantini is high rises, restaurants, kind of a luxury center in the city. You'll see a lot of sort of American conveniences, the Starbucks and malls and all of that stuff. It's going to feel very, very similar to being in New York City in the nicest spots or whatever. And trust me, it's not just Piantini. It actually spreads out to all these other neighborhoods right there, like Bellavista and Naco and so many others. There's a whole center to the city of Santo Domingo, big area that is amazing, fun, great to get around, and you'll enjoy and you'll be perfectly safe. Don't worry, I'm going to speak about safety in my very last tip, because I know it's a big one. If you're going to stay in Santo Domingo, you have to go check out Zona Colonial. This is the colonial zone. There's a plaza there called Plaza España that has a big house built by Christopher Columbus. Whatever you feel about him, I don't know, but the point is, it's an entire historic district that you should go check out for sure. And there are some amazing restaurants and fun things to do there. You gotta go check out Hasta la Tambora. Go on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. It's right in Zona Colonial. It's right next to Plaza España. And it is run by a music legend down here. And you're gonna have music and fun times. And they have, I kid you not, the best drinks I've ever had. I was gonna say in the country, but in both countries, US and here. Best drinks I've ever had at Hasta la Tambora. The presentation, the quality, the whole nine. Also in the colonial zone is a restaurant called Tornasol. It's right next to what they call the Malecón, which is the kind of strip along the water right outside of Zona Colonial. But Tornasol, great food. I did an amazing episode of a show I have called Grub with Gruber there with two other expat local guys that I've become friends with. Great food at Tornasol. If you like goat or if you never tried it, it's called Chivo. Check it out at Tornasol. And if you want to be shocked, back over in Piantini, run over to a place that I've dubbed to be the best restaurant in the entire Dominican Republic. You won't believe it. It's called Detroit Pizza RD. Detroit Pizza, yes, here, from a guy that's never been to Detroit that's making incredible food there. Not only the pizzas, but all of his food, all of his desserts, insane. You just gotta trust me. Go to Detroit Pizza when you're here in Piantini in Santo Domingo. Or if you're passing through, grab some stuff on the way out. Spend some money, get a bunch of different things. You won't regret it. My next tip is for Las Terrenas, which I talked about earlier, is up in the Samana Peninsula, which is probably the most idyllic, beautiful place in the entire country. There are movies filmed like Pirates of the Caribbean on that peninsula because of just how incredible you'll see when you're up there. It is. Las Terrenas is a bustling, fun little town right up there. That's probably easiest accessed if you fly into Santo Domingo and drive up about 2 hours. You'll go highway for a chunk of it, and then you're gonna go through the hills. And when you crest the final hill and look over to your left, you're gonna see a view of the ocean. I mean, floors you. And then once you're in Las Terrenas, you'll see restaurants, fun times. What I would suggest you do is get an Airbnb near Playa Bonita. Rent one of those little side-by-side ATV things and just use that to tool around town and beach hop and all of that stuff. If you want to get even more adventurous, take your car and drive an hour east out to the tip of Samaná to a town called Las Galeras and take the 7 beaches tour. Ay, Dios mío, you'll be absolutely blown away by that area. And for whatever it's worth, Samaná, that area, I believe, is the next frontier for development and growth. There's a small airport that's going to grow eventually. So buying and owning there is a smart move for anybody thinking in that way. Now, if you're looking for a place to eat there's a restaurant group here called Mosquito, like mosquito, great food. Get their empanadas, get everything, but great food, and they have a restaurant right in Las Terrenas, so check them out. My next tip involves this incredible mountain town in the middle of the country, Jarabacoa. Here's what I would do going to Jarabacoa. You can check out so many different things, but I would get an Airbnb inside a community, an area up in the mountain called Hamaca de Dios. And while in there, stop by the restaurant named Hamaca de Dios and get a drink, a basic drink. The food, but drinks and the view are absolutely worth it. For a good dinner, you could stop by a place downtown called Pele. There's a spot up on one of the mountains called Vista del Campo. Check out this entryway and this wine cellar right underneath this plexiglass floor. Really, really cool spot. Grab some carrot cake from La Tinaja downtown, and you can swing by waterfalls and rivers like this one, Salto Jimenoa Dos. This is probably my favorite getaway in all of the country outside of going to a beach. This is an absolute find. You gotta check it out, but bring a sweater because it actually gets a little bit chilly at night. All right, my last tip is don't believe the bad stuff. Dominican Republic is dubbed to be this like third world nation, and there are third world elements here for sure. My wife grew up here. She grew up in a town about 45 minutes away from where we live. And when you go there, you'll see it. You'll see the poverty and what you kind of think about when people describe the Dominican Republic. But again, just drive up the road here or around the country and you're gonna find a ton of prosperity, a ton of infrastructure, a lot of great things. There's a lot of room for the country to still go, but it's on an amazing trajectory. So just know this, where you're gonna be going, all the places I just talked about, it's safe. Should you take the precautions you would take anywhere? Absolutely. Let me give you an example. I was in Austin, Texas recently, and I stayed at a hotel downtown that was about, 10 blocks from a podcast studio that I was supposed to go to record for my podcast, which is called Tribe of Millionaires. That podcast studio was next to like a Whole Foods in this really cool area, very safe. And where I was staying, amazingly safe. But I don't know Austin. So I took an Uber from point A to point B, even though it was only a 10-block walk. And along the way, I went through this little section where there was all these homeless folks kind of like laid out on the streets and everything else that I would have walked through had I walked. When I got to the studio, I just said to the guy that was helping me out there, the producer, and said, hey man, I'm good to walk back, right? I just saw like a homeless encampment along the way. That's all I have to deal with. He goes, I wouldn't walk back. He's like, that little section that you're talking about, they get aggressive. And he told me stories of being attacked there for not giving his food away to them when they insisted on taking it. It's an issue in the US right now. The homeless population is unfortunately growing and unfortunately has become maybe, a bit more entitled. So the point of me telling that story is even when I'm in the United States, in a city like Austin, as a guy that doesn't know the area, I'm not gonna assume, oh, it must be, it's nice here, it's nice there, it must be nice between here and there. So I took the Uber and I'm glad I did. I took an Uber back to avoid a section that might have been a problem for me. And I would suggest you use the same caution here, just like you would there. If you don't know it here, then have somebody drive you, an Uber driver, a driver, whatever, take you there, as opposed to assuming you can just walk it. So if you're in Piantini and you're like, oh, it's 3-4 blocks away, it's probably fine. But if you don't know, then take the Uber. And then once you see the ride, the next time you can walk. So honestly, it's simply common sense. No one's looking to kill you. No one cares. They want to go about their lives here. They want to make money and do their thing. Do they want you to pay them for things? Sure. Like if they can sell you something, they'll sell you something. Could somebody pickpocket you? Yeah, but again, I travel all around the country and I don't have my hand on my wallet all the time. Does that make sense? So I would just say use the same diligence you exercise anywhere and you'll be perfectly fine. Let me just ease your mind on safety even more. Santo Domingo is the capital and it has a massive population and it has by far the worst neighborhoods in the country. Again, easily avoidable, but that's where they are. So when you look at crime rate here, Santo Domingo shows a really high crime rate compared to the rest of the country. So I did this. I looked at the United States from 3 different crime rates: the homicide rate, the violent crime rate, and the property crime rate. And then I compared to the Dominican Republic without Santo Domingo. Don't worry, I'll get Santo Domingo back in here. The US has a 6.5 per 100,000 homicide rate versus an 8 to 9 for DR outside of Santo Domingo. Again, that's not a major difference. If you include Santo Domingo, it's more like 11. Violent crime in the US is 4 to 5 per 1,000 people, and in here in the Dominican Republic, it's 2.5 to 3. So it's actually a lot less per 1,000. And from a property crime rate, you have 22 to 25 per 1,000 people. In the Dominican Republic, the stats aren't clear, but they have it projected around 10 to 12 per 1,000. Again, the US stats are probably more certain than the DR stats, but the point is it's not as crazy as you think. And look, let's map Santo Domingo. If we look at all 3 of those crime rates and create an index and then compare it to all US cities, you know where it would rank? 31st in total crime rate. That's behind popular cities like Las Vegas, Miami, New Orleans, Phoenix, and even Chicago. So again, if you would say, oh, I'd go to Vegas anytime, it's the same sort of mindset as if you would go to Santo Domingo or come to the Dominican Republic in general. I wouldn't go off strip in Vegas without knowing where I was going. It's the same thing here. I wouldn't go someplace I don't know if I'm in Santo Domingo or anywhere for that matter. And then once I know it, I'm good. Those are my 12 travel tips for your next trip down here in the Dominican Republic. Would love for you to subscribe, like, drop a comment. What did I miss? Drop it down below if you've traveled here. What's another tip you might throw out there for others to know? And hey, if you're looking for the best restaurants you can find all around the country, just click right here and I'm going to display all of them for you for 2025 and beyond. See you on the next one.